Hello human beings, Power Gamer here, and I recently entered a contest where I have to research orange marsupials, and I was really excited until I found out that marsupials are a type of animal and not a coffee drink. Might as well put my research to some good use.
Crash Bandicoot, one of the earliest examples of a PlayStation mascot. Sony's had a lot of mascots over the years, but Crash Bandicoot was arguably their first big one. If you weren't buying a PS1 for Final Fantasy VII or Metal Gear Solid, you were probably buying it for Crash. But where did he come from? The original concept was created by Andy Gavin and Jason Rubin, two employees of Naughty Dog, and the rights were picked up by the newly founded Universal Interactive Entertainment. They originally envisioned it as a 3D beat-em-up similar to Final Fight, and took heavy inspiration from Donkey Kong Country. And as a funny side note, the prototype name for it was Sonic's Ass Game, since the main character was primarily seen from the back. They decided the PlayStation would be the best system to develop it for, and they wanted to make a mascot for an animal not many people knew about. The game was finally released on September 9th, 1996 in North America, with Europe getting it a couple months later. It was positively received and ended up becoming one of the best-selling games on the PlayStation 1. It spawned a franchise that would end up switching developers a few times until the rights were sold to Activision. Under Activision, developers Vicarious Visions would then remaster the game along with its two PS1 sequels as the Insane Trilogy, which was released on June 30th, 2017.
While I don't have a huge amount of experience with Crash, I have played the entire Insane Trilogy, plus a little bit of 4, and yes, the remaster is the version I'm going to be playing today for reasons I'll get into later. It's been a while since I played the first game though, so let's give it a go.
The game begins with a scientist named Dr. Neo Cortex and his assistant, Dr. N. Brio, experimenting on various animals so they can build an army to take over the world. One of these experiments is a bandicoot named Crash, and for those of you wondering, this is what a bandicoot is. Crash is exposed to the Cortex Vortex, and while he becomes stronger, he also becomes dumber. Crash escapes from Cortex's lab and plummets to the ground, so Cortex and Brio then try to experiment on another bandicoot named Tawna, who's implied to be Crash's girlfriend.
Now it's up to Crash to get back to Cortex's lab and save Tawna. The story's basic, like most platformers, but it does the job.
The original Crash game was definitely dated in terms of visuals, but I think it still has some charm to it. The environments look decent, and while the models are pretty jagged, they can have some decent expressions. The voice acting and animations were also pretty impressive for a PS1 game, but that's just the original. The remaster looks absolutely gorgeous. Look at this, the colors, the textures, the backgrounds, the animations. This game looks like a 3D animated movie, and it's amazing. And the cutscenes are even better than they were in the original. And my god, this soundtrack is awesome. It's so funky and catchy and really fits the vibe of going on this tropical adventure. I love it. Now as for the game itself, it's a 3D platformer where the goal is to simply reach the end of the stage. It's not like some of the 3D Mario games or Ape Escape where you run around and collect things. Your main objective is to simply get from point A to point B. Crash can jump on enemies to kill them, but he can also spin to send them flying and potentially kill more enemies they hit. I gotta say, spinning is my preferred method of killing enemies. It's just so much more fun to do, and it feels way more accurate as well. You can also spin and launch these peach-like things called Wumpa Fruit. As you might have guessed, you get an extra life for collecting 100 of them. And out of all the extra life objects and platformers I played, these ones are by far the most plentiful. They're everywhere. This game loves to shower you with extra lives, which you're gonna need because not only is this game absolutely filled with bottomless pits, but Crash can be almost as durable as Bubsy because he dies in only one hit. I say almost because not only is there no fall damage in this game, suck it you fleabag, but he can also find Aku Aku, which is a mask that contains a powerful spirit inside of it. Collecting 1 lets you take an extra hit, collecting 2 lets you take 2 extra hits, and collecting 3 makes you completely invincible, run faster, and plays this awesome tune. The levels are filled with boxes to break. You can break them by jumping on them, spinning them, or just running into them when you're invincible. You've got basic boxes that contain 1 Wumpa Fruit, ones with extra lives, ones with Aku Aku, ones with 10 Wumpa Fruit that you need to bounce on repeatedly to get them all, TNT boxes which explode so you have to jump on them to start a timer because spinning them explodes them instantly, arrow boxes which bounce you up and can only be destroyed by spinning, checkpoint boxes which take a guess, and question mark boxes which can contain extra lives, a bunch of Wumpa Fruit, or tokens. Tokens can be used to access bonus stages after collecting 3 of them. They contain extra lives, Wumpa Fruit, and boxes to break. They come in 3 different varieties: Tawna, Brio, and Cortex. Tawna stages are fairly simple, Brio stages are typically harder, and Cortex stages contain keys which unlock secret levels. They're really short, and dying in them doesn't cost a life, so you can replay them as many times as you want. The Tawna stages were also how you saved the game in the original, but the remaster thankfully changed it so you can save at any time.
At its core, the remaster is the same game as the original, but there are a few things they changed about it.
One of the biggest changes is the controls, more specifically, the jumping physics. Crash's jump was really floaty in the original, and it was kind of awkward. Here, it's a lot faster, which helps make it feel a lot more natural. The only downside, though, is that the game's levels were designed with the original jumping physics in mind, so some stages are actually harder than they were before because you have to be more precise. You have to hold down the button more to ensure you cross larger jumps, and in some cases you can slip off a platform because you just barely missed it. This was pretty controversial when the game first came out because many people were upset about how much harder it was, to the point where people were literally calling it the Dark Souls of platformers because, as we all know, Dark Souls is the only game that's ever been hard. The other biggest change, though, is with the box breaking. Every level ends when you reach this warp point, and right before it is a small thing that shows you how many boxes you broke in the level. If you missed any when you exit the level, you get a little sequence where the ones you missed are dropped on Crash's head, but if you broke all of them, you get a gem. While beating the game can be pretty tricky, getting all the box gems is where the real challenge of Crash Bandicoot lies. And let me tell you, it's pretty irritating to get through the whole stage and find out you missed one box. If you're just going through the levels, you could beat the game fairly quickly if you're persistent enough, but the gems are where its replayability comes from. Now, how is this different than it was in the original? Well, when you broke a checkpoint box, your progress in the level was saved, but the number of boxes you broke weren't. So if you died even one time, all of the boxes you broke are back. And even if you backtrack and break the ones you already got, you still don't get the gem. So you have to beat every single level without dying after you reach the first checkpoint if you want to get all the gems. In the remaster, however, you can die as many times as you want and still get the box gem.
This is the sole reason I am playing the remaster. There is no way in hell I am subjecting myself to that.
You can't even collect all the gems immediately because certain levels have these strange outlines in them. That's because you have to collect one of the 6 colored gems, which reveal these platforms that take you to extra paths which contain more boxes. Now, the colored gems themselves act the same as the gray ones, but the Insane Trilogy kept it so that you can't die if you want to get them. And let me tell you, there is nothing worse than making it all the way to the end and then screwing up, forcing you to restart the whole stage all over again, because some of these levels are not only really hard, but others are pretty freaking long. This was only 6 levels, and I hated it, so I can't imagine doing it for all of them. Thank God dying in the bonus level doesn't count.
Although I must admit, I'm a little concerned about where Crash keeps these things.
Even if you aren't going for all the boxes, Crash 1 can be pretty hard. I already mentioned how the jumping physics force you to be more precise, but a lot of these level designs can be really irritating, either because of annoying enemy placement or the times where your biggest enemy is the camera. And this is a game where the camera is completely static the whole time. The problem is that some of these levels have really awkward depth perception, so it can be really hard to tell how far you have to jump. And stages that are really dark can have you overshoot jumps constantly. It's even worse in levels with branching paths and metal crates you have to hit to reveal other boxes further back in the stage, because the camera doesn't turn around when you're backtracking, so you have very little idea of what's in front of you. There are some levels where you're constantly running towards the camera, but at least those ones have the camera scaled back a bit so you can see more of what's ahead. These ones? Nope. Just remember when you need to jump, and try not to run into any enemies. Every time you die, you get sent back to your last checkpoint box, and if you get a game over, you have to start the whole stage all over again. You get plenty of extra lives, but I really don't like how they don't respawn. And I don't mean they don't respawn after one death. That makes sense. You can exit a stage or get a game over, and they still don't come back. The only way to get the extra lives to respawn is to reload your save file, which is just plain stupid. Thankfully, the game does get easier with some practice. My first playthrough of this game, I got at least one game over on almost every single level, but this time I was swimming in lives. Just look at that number. I didn't farm for lives or anything, that just happened naturally. Maybe I knew what was coming, maybe I've just gotten better, but I didn't find this game as hard as I did when I first played it. It's still challenging at times, but I wasn't exactly pulling my hair out, most of the time.
The remaster also tweaked some little things.
If you die enough times, you get a free Aku Aku mask. The game gives you some hints. Boxes with 10 Wumpa Fruit only take 5 bounces to break as opposed to 10, and in the original, a TNT box wouldn't destroy other boxes if it exploded off-screen, which is thankfully not the case here. It even adds some new features like being able to play as Crash's sister, Coco Bandicoot, and time trials where you have to beat the level as fast as possible without dying. I also think it's pretty neat how the world map makes it actually feel like you're going on this adventure and how the level's themes actually relate to where you are on the map. You start off on Insanity Beach, which is a great first level that introduces the game's mechanics. Spinning, jumping, breaking boxes, it works great. Next up is Jungle Rollers, a jungle level with these giant rock wheels. Fun time. The Great Gate. This level is mostly played from a 2D perspective where you have to climb upwards along this fortress while dealing with the natives who bounce you back with their shields. You have to jump on them and then spin them to get by. Boulders is the first level where you have to run towards the camera while being chased by a giant boulder, and you don't have to worry about breaking most of the boxes. The boulder does it for you. Upstream has you move up this river on lily pads while avoiding fish and giant plant monsters. Now we get our first boss, a tribe warrior named Papu Papu, and he's absolutely pathetic. Avoid a staff and jump on him. He goes down in no time. It's really underwhelming, and spoiler alert, this is gonna be a pattern. Rolling Stones, another jungle level. It's pretty much just a harder version of Jungle Rollers, not much else to say. Next, Hog Wild. This level has Crash hijack a pig and ride it through this village. He also seems to be giving Dr. Wily a run for his money. You can't crash into anything or you die immediately, and the controls are pretty stiff. It's also kind of annoying because you can't backtrack if you miss a box, so you have to kill yourself if you want to get it.
Unless you're me and you somehow managed to get all the boxes and beat the level on your first try.
Moving on to Native Fortress. This is where the game really starts to get harder. While the levels before this haven't been too bad, Native Fortress is a major difficulty spike. It's pretty much just a harder version of the Great Gate. It's significantly longer, has much more enemies, jumps, and fireballs to deal with. It's not the worst, but this is where Crash 1 starts to show its true colors. After this, we have Up the Creek. It's just a harder version of Upstream. Next boss fight is Ripperoo, a deranged kangaroo in a straitjacket that you have to avoid while detonating giant TNT boxes to explode when he lands near them. Not great, but not terrible. Now we have the Lost City, which takes place in these ancient ruins and is the first colored gem level, and it's a total pain. It's so long, and screwing up is so easy to do. It took me ages to get the green gem, and I'm glad it's over. Now we have Temple Ruins, where you go through this dark temple. A really cool theme, but the fact that it's dark makes it so you can't see your drop shadow, and the depth perception becomes awful. Road to Nowhere. This level sucks. You want proof that the remaster can be harder than the original? Look right here. You have to jump across this bridge with broken beams and avoid these indestructible pigs. You have to be insanely precise, and the first time I played this game, it drove me nuts. It's easily the second worst level in the game. I hate it. Boulder Dash. Love the name. Level's alright. It's another boulder chase level and not much else. Sunset Vista. It's like the Lost City, only even longer, but thankfully there's no color gem, so it's not as aggravating to complete. It also has one of the 2 Cortex bonus levels. Boss time, Koala Kong. A koala that's the perfect example of why you should never skip leg day. Avoid his boulders and the TNT until you can spin a boulder back into him. It's fine, but nothing special. Heavy Machinery, a factory where you have to kill these drones and avoid these hot pipes. You can land on the cool pipes, just not the hot ones. Cortex Power, the worst example of backtracking. There are so many branching paths and so many aggravating box placements. It took me ages to get this level's gem. It stinks. Generator Room. This level has the orange gem. It's not as bad as the Lost City, but it can still be really annoying. I do like the theme of it being the room that powers the rest of Cortex's factory, though. Toxic Waste, a level filled with green goo and holds the blue gem. You have to avoid these barrels being thrown at you, and while the rolling ones aren't that bad, the bouncing ones can be pretty tricky. My advice is to just run for it and hope you get through. Pinstripe Potoroo is a Potoroo with a Tommy gun. Just wait for him to fire, attack, and hide again. Meh. The High Road.
This level sucks.
It's Road to Nowhere, but even shittier. Larger gaps, more boxes, more pigs, more slippery platforms, more braking panels, everything to make this level worse. You also have to bounce on these turtles, and you can unintentionally strand yourself. It even starts out awful with having 4 boxes that you have to find by jumping on these hidden platforms. Are you kidding me? And yes, I know you can jump on the ropes, but that's not as easy as it sounds. This level is fucking awful, and the only reason I didn't get a game over is because I had 80 lives. The High Road. Now that I got that out of my system, we can move on to Slippery Climb. You gotta be kidding me. You have to climb up the side of this tower and use moving platforms, spinning platforms, and birds. It was easily the hardest level in the original game, and it has the red gem, so that means I had to beat this level without dying once. Lights out. You have to travel through this castle while using Aku Aku to light the way. If you get hit once, or go too long without grabbing another mask, the light burns out and you're stuck in the dark. And this level has the purple gem, because of course it does. Jaws of Darkness. It's a harder version of Temple Ruins. Castle Machinery. It's a harder version of Heavy Machinery. Dr. Nitrous Brio. Probably the best boss fight in the game. You have to avoid his beakers and jump on these blobs to squirt goo at him before he turns into the fricking Hulk. Then you have to jump on his head a few times and you're good. The Lab. The last of the regular stages, and it's brutal. You have to avoid scientists, lightning gates, blobs, closing doors, and disappearing floors to get to the end. And of course, it has the yellow gem, and it took me ages. Before we get to the end, though, I need to talk about the secret levels. Whole Hog, which is another hog riding level, and Fumbling in the Dark, which is a harder version of Lights Out. Lovely. But there's one more level that was added in the Insane Trilogy as free DLC, Stormy Ascent. A level that was cut from the original game because it was deemed too hard by the developers. It's a harder version of Slippery Climb, that's all I need to say, and you bet I played this level. I actually enjoyed this more than the high road. It felt a lot more fair and satisfying, aside from this jump right here. Dang it, dang it, dang it, dang it. Dang it! Finally! Yeah, give me that gem! Alright, now it's time to finish this. You can use the Great Hall to build a bridge out of all the gems you collected to reach Tawna and beat the game without having to fight Cortex, essentially your reward for getting all the gems. But I'm gonna fight Cortex anyway. You have to avoid his purple laser blasts and spin the green ones back into him while avoiding the blue ones that scatter around. Not a great final boss, but it's alright. After you take him out, his ship is destroyed and Crash rescues Tawna. Unless you built the gem bridge, in which case the two of them fly off on a bird, which begs the question, why didn't Tawna just fly away in the first place? But yeah, the game's over, and the secret ending even tells you what the other bosses are up to, so that's neat.
Crash Bandicoot is a bit rough. Like Sonic and Mega Man, it took a couple entries for the series to really find its footing, but I still had a decent time with it. If you do play this game though, make sure it's the remaster. It's better in almost every single way. I just wish it didn't trick me into thinking Bandicoots have gems inside of them, because now I'm not allowed at the Cincinnati Zoo anymore.